So hello everyone, I'm Niv Yehezkel, I'm happy to be here. And today we're talking about cross-chain bridges in crypto. And specifically vulnerability research I've been doing like a month and a half ago on one of the very popular bridges in crypto that eventually could allow me to steal around $5 billion. So a few things to know about this talk. First and foremost, I will try to make it as simplified and accessible for those of you that don't know like the perks of blockchains and bridges and all that. So I'll try to do that. Second, I did not use these vulnerabilities to steal any funds, so we're good. So before I get started, like in the raise of hands, how many people like have Bitcoin or Ethereum, any tokens or anything like that? That's cool. How many people ever get scammed or hacked for tokens or anything like that? Cool. Yet. Okay. So that's me. I'm a security researcher. I've been playing. I'm an active member of the Postent CTF team, and I'm working on a new Web3 startup, Web3 security startup, in the last few months. So let's get started. So around to 2009, a bit after the financial crisis that happened all around the world in 2008. There was like a mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto that came up with a very cool white paper, like explaining of a new decentralized financial system that just globally works and has no borders and all. And it was something just a few people really minded back in the day. 6 years later, after Bitcoin like made a lot of waves, a new, far more generalized blockchain has emerged, named Ethereum. And essentially, Bitcoin was primarily meant for money transfer. And Ethereum, like the whole concept was to generalize like anything on the blockchain, to make any application decentralized and borderless. So in Ethereum, basically what you have is that you write code, you have people in the world running the same kind of software, and when you deploy that code, all the people in the world run this code that you wrote. So that was Ethereum, and it made a lot of waves, and that's a great blockchain. Now, fast forward to today, we have many, many chains. We have some called the killer of Ethereum chains, and we have those things that were built out of Ethereum. So basically what you have is what people call like a multi-chain multiverse, that you have lots of chains. So each chain has its own uniqueness and qualities and use cases. Some are better for like developing games on it, and some are better for other things. So basically, the way the world looks at it is that the future and present is currently multi-chain. But the thing is that people wanted more than that in terms of, I can develop like an application on one chain, but if like millions of users just live on another chain because they have all their funds in it and they work with it, I would probably want to make those chains communicate. So cross-chain is basically the idea of letting chains communicate with one another. So why even bother with communicating again? So for the first, there are many reasons, but the first reason, in my opinion, is interoperability, that chains could talk to each other, transfer messages, tokens, and all that. And the second thing is that if I have crypto only on Ethereum, and then there's another chain called Solana, which is like a complete different galaxy than Ethereum, and I want to transfer those funds, I don't have to hold like two wallets, and I could just like move my funds from Ethereum to Solana. So that's sort of a user experience and allows capital efficiency among those chains. So people realized that cross chains might be a good idea, and the term bridges were conceived. Like the whole point of bridges is basically this is the construct that enables like the transfer of messages, of funds, and all those kind of stuff. And currently today, you have lots of bridges with many different use cases, and essentially lots of people's funds locked in it. Because if you want like to go from Ethereum to Solana, for instance, like 2 chains, you have to put your funds in Ethereum, and then you can have them on Solana. So basically, those bridges like are a very sensitive place in the entire ecosystem because they have many people's funds are locked on those bridges. So in the next slides, we're going to talk about a bit how those bridges work, like from a very high-level perspective. So there we go. So basically, imagine that we have 2 chains. Like one is the Ethereum chain, this is the logo, and one is the Polygon chain, which is another chain. So basically, Alice has 100 ETH, that's the currency in Ethereum, that she wants to move to Polygon because she wants to play her favorite game in Polygon. In Ethereum, she cannot because the game is not in Ethereum. So she has that dire need. Then what she does is basically she locks those tokens or coins into the bridge. So the bridge is basically a pool of funds, of people's funds, that basically accepts anyone's funds. And he is able to like just accumulate all those tokens. So basically what Alice does is just she locks those funds into the bridge. So now the bridge has like a pool with 100 ETH. Later on, what happened is the bridge is doing something called minting. The bridge is aware of those 2 chains. And what it does is basically mints tokens in Polygon. So now we're even. Like we have 100 tokens in Polygon for Alice. And there are 100 ETH locked for Alice, which are unusable in chain A. So basically, Alice still has just 100 tokens. So that's one direction. The other direction is asymmetrical. Now, Alice has 100 tokens in Polygon that she wants to move back into Ethereum. So the other way around is normally not really the same. What she does, she basically burns the funds that she has. It's like burning, she no longer has them. But Alice relies on the bridge to see that she burned those tokens. Then the bridge knows that Alice burned those tokens, that she like previously had them on Polygon, and then the bridge knows to release those tokens, and Alice gets them back. So basically, that's an asymmetrical process between like depositing from one chain to another, and then going back to the original chain where your native assets are, consists of like burn and release, as opposed to lock and mint. Cool. So bridges are very cool, and I did this research as like specifically I looked at bridges and I thought, wow, this is like a very crazy construct in this ecosystem, because bridges are just code and relatively is very like small code as opposed to like other things, because they have to do a very simple thing, as we just saw. So I thought bridges might be a very good candidate for vulnerability research, because once you do that, you might be able to steal all the bridges, all the pool of the bridges, because that's the immediate outcome that I was looking for. So I thought maybe give it a shot and look at the Polygon bridge. So a few words about the Polygon bridge that I've chosen to research. So started with Polygon. What is Polygon even? So as I've said, this is a world of multi-chain. You have Ethereum and lots of other chains. So Polygon is one of them. It's like 4-year-old, and they recently raised like $450 million, the company Polygon. And currently lots of NFTs and all those kinds that you guys probably hear about are stored on Polygon. So the way it works is, the way blockchains work is that you have nodes across the world. So basically, you have a world computer. So Polygon is not different. So you have those what's called a validator node, which a validator node is just a piece of software that anyone can download. You can just run independently. Anyone can run it independently on his own computer. And then the validator, basically what it does, it puts like a stake into the system. And once a validator stakes into the system, like for example, I can put like $10,000 into the system. Now I have skin in the game. And now I have to support like mining blocks for the chain. So this means accepting transactions by people, running the code that was deployed, and then eventually I can get rewarded for that. So that's why validators want to be validators, because they can just put money into the system, and then they can get rewarded for performing well. So that's basically Polygon. Polygon is very, very big in the space. Cool. So Polygon also, besides being a chain by itself, they also developed their own bridge. So the bridge is a different concept than a chain. So they work on a bridge essentially, and the bridge is all-purpose is basically transferring funds from Polygon to Ethereum and back, because Polygon's concept is basically using Ethereum as a base layer. So they care a lot about Ethereum, so they build that bridge. And all that bridge means is that you have both contracts, or you have code both on Ethereum and on Polygon. So now we're going to see how this bridge looks like, and specifically we're going to concentrate on the way from Polygon back to Ethereum, which is the more interesting direction. But anyways, just going over all the steps, moving assets from Ethereum to Polygon is a very simple step. You just go to polygon.com, specifically their interface. You deposit funds into Ethereum. Now the validator nodes that run Polygon, they are aware of Ethereum. So they see that you deposited funds, and then they mint those tokens in Polygons, and then you can transfer your funds from Ethereum to Polygon. So that's the one direction, which is a bit more simple. Now the other direction really caught my eye is the other direction between Polygon back to Ethereum, which is way more interesting because Ethereum is it's a siloed blockchain. It only knows about itself. It doesn't really know of anything else. It knows to run transactions, save that output, save that state into all of those nodes that run Ethereum, and that's it. She doesn't know anything about Polygon. So how it works, like moving funds from Polygon back to Ethereum. So the first thing that you do is you burn the assets. As we've seen before, it's lock, mint, burn, and release. So first of all, you burn the assets. You send a transaction to burn your money. And then you save that transaction hash. And then you wait for something called checkpoint, which we'll see right immediately. And then you submit a proof that you burnt, you submit the transaction to Ethereum in order to release the assets. So basically, it's very simple steps. But again, what caught again my eye is that Ethereum is siloed. It doesn't know anything about Polygon. What is this checkpoint all about? How does he know that I burnt my assets on a different chain? So that's the next thing I started exploring. Started reading about what is a checkpoint. So again, the Matic chain right below is basically the Polygon chain. They're rebranded, so that's a still a relevant picture, but different name. So you have those block producers. This is the validator nodes. They run across the world. They mine transactions and all that. They produce blocks. This is why it's a blockchain. Then every once in a while, right now it's like around 20 minutes, they take all those transactions, all those blocks, they batch them together. They cryptographically calculate something called a Merkle trie, but no worries about that. So they have a digest of all the blocks that happened, and then they submit it into Ethereum. Now, the thing is that now Ethereum has like that cryptographic hash of something that denotes something that happened on Polygon. And that's very important because then Ethereum could use that in order to cryptographically check that, like the code in Ethereum could know that you could use that hash in order to cryptographically use that to verify that something happened on Ethereum. But a very important thing to notice here is that if anyone can send those kind of checkpoints, those digests that something happened on Polygon, you could basically just maliciously fake something that happened on Polygon. You could just say, hey, I just withdrawed like 10 million tokens worth of Ethereum in Polygon. Please release those funds for me. But it doesn't work that simply. If you remember, you have those validators nodes that run Polygon. And how it works is basically each validator, again, puts his stake to have skin in the game. And based on the stake that the validator puts, the checkpoint, once a checkpoint is sent into Ethereum, it must be signed, like cryptographically signed, by at least a majority of the validators. That means that if that checkpoint is a hash, like consisting like the last 20 minutes that happened on Polygon, so at least 2/3 plus 1 of the staking power of the validators have to sign it. Otherwise, it won't be accepted. If I sent like only on my own, like if I was validator 2 trying to send a malicious checkpoint, it won't be accepted on Ethereum because it's not signed by the majority of the system. So you must have a majority. If you look in this example, 2/3 of 220, which is the total staking power, like this is the entire staking power in this simplified diagram, is 148, and only validator 3 and 1 can send a checkpoint, which then can be used for the bridge to verify that stuff happened on Polygon. So I dug deeper, and then I tried to understand how this whole like staking works on Polygon, because it seems that if you need a majority to send a malicious checkpoint, I might just as well understand how to have majority in the system, like maybe natively, or then look for vulnerabilities and then maliciously. So currently there are like 100 validators in Polygon. They can raise the cap to be more, but there are only 100 validators in the network. So now we're going to demonstrate like what can happen in Polygon over time and what really happens over time. So let's start with validator number 1. Let's say that I'm in my home wants to run a validator. I have 100 Matic, which is the token of Polygon. It's around $2. So I have 100 Matic. And I stake them into Polygon. So I'm the only validator in the system, and the total staking power, like the total at all, is just my 100. So I can just send checkpoints to Polygon, and they will be accepted. Now another validator, so maybe someone, anyone in the world essentially, joined the system, and he stakes 70 Matic in the system. So now the total staking power is 170. Now a third validator joins the system with 50 Matic. And now in order for this entire system, or entire validator node system, in order for them to send checkpoints to Ethereum, they have to have at least 2/3 plus 1 of the total staking power as shown before. So no one by himself could send checkpoints that fake stuff, or even don't fake stuff. They just cannot send checkpoints without having like another one or two also signing that checkpoint. Another cool thing about staking, you have cool and important one. You have this concept called a delegator. So Polygon thought that's a hassle, like asking for people to run those complicated software that you have to maintain, and maybe it will run out of memory or out of disk. Those validators know, so they invented something called delegators. So delegators essentially can put their stake upon on validator nodes. So for instance, if I'm a delegator and I don't have to run any software, so if I'm a delegator, I can stake like 10 Matic because I see that validator 2 is something that I really trust and gets rewarded, like, and he's a top performer. So I really like this validator, and I can give my votes to him. Also see that if I go back and then now the total staking power is 220, and once I delegate my stakes into validator 2, my stake is 230 because I gave my 10 Matic power to that validator, basically made him stronger. Another cool thing that delegators can do in the system is migration. So the team actually thought of how we're going to make it easy for the entire world to support Polygon, because you have those 100 nodes in the system, and that's all for now. But they wanted anyone in the world to also get rewarded and put their stake into the system, because once you have more stakes in the system, it becomes much harder to for a single actor like to get consensus, like to be able to send a malicious checkpoint. So the total staking power has to be very big. So delegators can migrate from one validator to another. That means that once I deposit my funds into one validator, I don't have to pull them off from the validator and then deposit them again into validator 3. I can just in one transaction send the transaction that migrates from validator 2 to 3, and it will just work. So if you watch closely, again, the total staking power was 230, and once I migrated to another staking validator, it's still 230 because nothing changed. I just made validator 3 stronger, maybe because validator 2 started outperforming or whatever. I just decided to move. So that's about staking and migrating. Then I started to look at the state machine of validators. Like, imagine that I am a validator, I enter the system, I get a lot of rewards, and I'm happy and all that, and I make a lot of money, and then I want to retire because I made a lot of money because of Polygon. So I must have a way to unstake my money and like claim all the rewards and all the staking. I want to be out of the game. So Polygon also has obviously a way for that. They're not keeping captive all those validators. And so once a validator unstakes, the total staking power decreases by the power of the validator. If it was like 50 again, 230, now it's 180 because the validator just unstaked. So he's out of the game. Now essentially a slot for a validator opens, so another validator can come and watch that the validator just went out of the game, and then another validator can join the game. So I looked over all this system and basically tried to understand what keeps it like beating. And the total staking power was a number that kept like increasing and decreasing because of delegators like moving around and validators staking and unstaking, and the whole like state machine like looks a bit like the code didn't look very well. So it was very interesting to me to like try to trace exactly what happens to the total staking power in each step of the way. And eventually, once I do that, once I will be able to control that number, that total staking power number, I will be able to maliciously send transactions to send checkpoints into Ethereum, and then like fake that I withdrawed like billions of dollars in Polygon, and Ethereum would just believe me because it will accept the checkpoint because the total staking power is in my control. So if we could just bypass that single number that basically is holding the entire system, that would be really beneficial for us. So this is what I've found. Basically, we have the entire system again. You have 3 validators currently staking 230 tokens into the system, including one delegator that stakes his 10 Matic into the system. Now, validator 3 unstakes. And when he unstakes, he basically transitions from a staking state into an unstaking state. That means that the entire power of that validator has to be decreased from the total staking power. So that means also the stake power that the validator has deposited itself, like if I go back, the 50 matic that he deposited itself, and also the 10 matic that the delegator gave him. So once he unstakes, all those tokens are out of the must be decreased from the staking power. Now, if you remember, two things worth mentioning here is that validators can move from staking to unstaking state. So that's the state machine, like to simplify the form of it. And delegators can migrate to wherever they want because this is like a feature Polygon added. What I've found is once a delegator stakes his matic into a validator that then unstakes, once that delegator migrates from the validator that unstaked into a staking validator, something very peculiar happens because the migration does not take into account the fact that validator 3 went out of the game. So the total staking power, if you notice very closely, it should have been like 180 because the 10 delegator tokens now is back in the game, and if before it was 170, when it's back in the game, it has to be 180. So this is the basic bug that they have. The migration that does not take into account the state of the validator. So currently there is no harm, like nothing happens. But then I thought, what happens when another validator just unstakes? So when another validator unstakes, what happens is now the counter gets out of consistency. Because if before, when I deposited funds into validator 3, and then he unstaked, those 10 matic that I deposited decreased from the total staking power. Now, after I migrated into validator 2, and he unstakes again, those 10 matic that I've decreased from the total staking power are decreased again. So that's something that makes the counter go out of consistency. And the funny thing is that you can just repeat that process, and then once you migrate those tokens again to another validator, and he unstakes, now the total staking power is minus 20. So this process can be repeated. Like in each iteration that we migrate our tokens into a validator node, and then he unstakes, the total staking power is decreased by our tokens. But since we can migrate our funds from one validator to another, and then he can unstake again, those staking tokens are decreased again without ever increasing them while I migrated, allowing me to basically get down the total staking power up to a point which I can just, it's slow enough for me to send like a malicious checkpoint, because now the amount of total staking power is low enough, and then I can just basically drain the bridge. So now I'm outlining the entire POC, or what you have to do in order to be very rich. So you start with delegating some tokens into the system. So now you have 10 tokens in the system. This is step number 1. Nothing happened so far. Now you get a validator slot. It's decentralized. You should be able to get like a validator slot. Now you migrate those tokens that you deposited anywhere to that validator. Again, nothing really happened. Now we unstake the validator. So those X tokens that I've deposited are now decreased from total staking power. Now what I do is I basically repeat step 2 to 4. Because I catch a validator slot, I migrate those tokens. Now the counter is not increased by those tokens. I unstake the validator, and it causes again for the X tokens to be decreased. And then I can repeat the process, and in each iteration of the 2 to 4, those X tokens will be decreased by the total staking power. And then if I have if that X is like 2/3 of the total staking power, I can be I can have a consensus just by myself. So I can just ultimately I can just sign a checkpoint just by myself, and then fake that I've withdrawn billions of tokens in Polygon in that checkpoint, and then I can fool the system and profit billions of dollars. Cool. So summary. Basically, bridges are, or not basically, bridges are very, very complex constructs because they involve cryptography, and they attempt to basically hold like a duplicate state. They have 2 chains that cannot communicate, so the bridge has to be aware of those 2 chains. So it's basically it's sort of a complex construct. And the thing about bridges that I like the most is that they have a lot of money, and making them a very interesting candidate for vulnerability research, and thus that research. Another thing that is very important to keep in mind, in that space of cryptos, like you have many security audit companies that audit code all the time. You have around 50 audit companies that look at code all the time. And Polygon was around, I think, 4 years. I'm not sure specifically about that code, but the chain is alive for around 4 years. And nobody noticed that, that bug. And again, bridges may be complicated, but they're not like a giant piece of code that it's very hard to get into. I think like the Polygon bridge that I've researched is around like 30, 40 files, which I think doesn't sum up to a few thousand lines. So that's that. And the last thing that I think is the most important one is once I reported this vulnerability and then it got published, the amount of gratitude I got in the Twitter for people thanking me for saving that money was like crazy, because I just kept getting like messages of, thank you so much for saving my ass, thank you so much for saving me a lot of money. So I think generally the industry just needs more white hat hackers to look at those kind of stuff, because eventually it strengthens the ecosystem, and eventually this is people's money, so don't use it for the bad. Thank you.